The Lament of the Seventh, the past. Ferrusborn looked down at his hands, slowly turning them over. One was augmetic, forged of iron and steel, a reminder of his induction into the Iron Hands. The other, flesh and blood, was his original, though he scarcely thought of it that way. He had lost the augmetic 3 times. Technically, this was his 4th hand, and his 2nd arm. His fingers drifted to the edge of his skull, brushing over the rough, tender line of surgery. His 5th eye. In many ways, Caedon reflected, he was an analog of his warband, a collection of spare parts and scraps, stitched together by hope, necessity, and desperation. Since the Praetor's death, their warband had retreated alongside the remnants of the traitor forces, falling back through bitter battles and grinding warfare. The long march to the Eye of Terra had been unrelenting. His captain now led them. Caedon's lip curled slightly at the thought. He and the captain had never seen eye to eye. Caedon had served as the Praetor's Vox officer and closest companion for over a century, long before the heresy had splintered the galaxy. But now, his daemon blade offered a fragile truce. The captain tolerated him, but Caedon's presence remained an unwelcome shadow, a reminder of their fallen leader and the path that had brought them to ruin. Shame lingered within their ranks, thick as rust on iron. Even after so many years, they had refused to cast off their old identity. They had always been the 7th Company of the Iron Hands. That name was the last thing they clung to, though over time the Iron Hands faded. They became simply the 7th. Other names followed as the centuries crawled by: the 7th Raiders, the 7th Brigands, the 7th Chosen. But always they were 7th. The Emperor's children had extended an offer to the 7th, a chance to fold into their legion. In the chaotic years that followed the heresy, many traitor legions fractured into scattered warbands, but a few, like the Word-bearers and Iron Warriors, had managed to retain some semblance of their former structure. The Emperor's children sought to preserve their identity in much the same way, gathering those willing to join beneath their banner. Despite already having a 7th Company, they welcomed the traitor Iron Hands into their ranks. For a time, the 7th became the 7th Assault Company, while the existing Emperor's Children's 7th, a siege company, retained their role. Their path to the Emperor's children had been complex and unplanned. The 7th had not initially sought the embrace of the Phoenician sons. Their praetor had long held a friendship with the captain of the 2nd Company of the Emperor's children. When the 2nd found itself under assault by loyalist elements of their own legion, the praetor had faced an impossible choice. He could not, in good conscience, raise his blade against the warriors of his friend. The 7th had already been teetering on the edge of damnation. That battle was the tipping point. Amidst the slaughter, Caedon had lifted the demon blade from the bloodied mud where it lay discarded. The Emperor's children, ever superstitious in their arrogance, had taken it as a sign, an omen of victory. From that day, the 7th fought alongside their newfound brothers. They marched in step with the Emperor's children, cleaving through loyalist forces until even the 3rd Legion began to decay and collapse beneath the weight of their excesses. Eventually, the 7th stood alone. The Emperor's children dissolved into scattered warbands of their own making, but the 7th endured, still calling themselves the 7th Company, even as their parent legion crumbled. The 7th never followed the other warbands into the Eye of Terra. While the traitor legions retreated into the warp, the 7th fled in a different direction, toward the Maelstrom. Yet even there, they found no home among the demon worlds or the patronage of dark gods. They lived in real space, drifting from warzone to warzone, often fetching and caring for the Emperor's children. Their existence was one of constant motion, never lingering too long, lest they be hunted down by the Imperium. On the far edge of the Maelstrom lay a peculiar world, orbiting a dying star. Over time, its strange path would carry it through the warp rift that scarred the region, briefly submerging the planet in the tides of the immaterium before it drifted back into reality. It was a useful tool. The Word-bearers had been the first to discover it, and they had guided the 7th there during the long years after the heresy. The 7th raided Imperial space for supplies and relics, storing them on the world over the course of decades. When the planet sank into the warp, they could retrieve their spoils without risking the perils of the usual translation methods. No astropaths, no navigators, no traceable warp signatures. The Imperium never knew they had come and gone. But one day, nearly 1,000 years after the heresy, Caedon found himself stranded there. A shuttle engine failure had left him and 2 of his brothers grounded, along with a handful of chapter serfs. They watched, powerless, as the planet's orbit carried it into the maelstrom of the warp. The serfs went mad almost immediately. One of the Iron Hands vanished, slipping into the swirling haze of unreality, never to be seen again. Caedon and his last companion endured, and they bore witness to the change. The world, barren and bleak, came to life. Stagnant pools of water flushed blue, rippling with golden fish that flickered like starlight beneath the surface. Moss and lichen spread across the rocks, giving way to red grass that cut like razor wire. Mushrooms sprouted, their stalks glowing faintly under the strange sky. Trees unfurled, their long, trailing leaves whispering in the warp wind. Caedon's hand strayed to his side, feeling the familiar hilt of his daemon blade. But it had changed. In his grip, the rusted weapon coiled and slithered, transforming into a serpent-like creature with thin, spindly legs. The daemon, the never-born entity within the blade, revealed its true form, skittering and weaving through the grass. It played with other warp-spawned things that roamed the alien garden, as song and laughter echoed through the vibrant landscape. For the first time since his induction into the Iron Hands, Caedon felt joy and relief, watching as the unreality of the warp brought a living dreamscape to the almost lifeless rock of a planet. Then the change reversed. The mushrooms shriveled, the grass withered, the fish vanished, and the water turned murky and thick. As the world drifted back into real space, all faded. When Caedon looked down, the serpent was gone. In his hand rested the same rusted blade he had always carried, its edge gleaming faintly in the dying light of the system's star. By his chronometer, the ordeal had lasted 10 minutes, but when the frigate arrived to retrieve them, the captain, his pink armor freshly notched and scarred, explained the truth. "You've been gone 500 years. He had laughed, giving him the first ever slap on his pauldron, denoting respect. In that time, the 7th had lost another 40 brothers. Their once proud fleet had been reduced to 3 frigates and a destroyer. Caedon felt something within him break. He could see it all, the inevitable future. The last ships would be hunted down. His brothers would die one by one, until there was no one left, until only he remained.